Not all heroes wear capes, and some don't even make it past the first draft. When Marvel launched the animated series The New Fantastic Four in 1978, the Human Torch was absent from the lineup. In his place was a strange little robot called Herbie. For decades, legend had it that the Human Torch had been replaced because the network feared he would inspire kids to set themselves on fire. The true story is much more mundane. As comic book historian Mark Evanier explained on his blog, in 1977, Marvel made a deal that licensed a number of their characters to Universal Studios to be developed as live-action TV movies and potential series. The Human Torch was one of the characters that Universal wanted to develop, and a teleplay was written but never produced. Marvel confirmed that, since the Human Torch was being considered for a live-action project, the rights to the character were tied up, so they swapped him out. While Johnny Storm was surely missed, Herbie was still dreamt up by Stan Lee and designed by Jack Kirby. He even entered the comic book continuity in 1979 and became a fan favorite himself. One of the most exciting parts of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was getting to see heroes from old Marvel franchises. Thanks to the Illuminati's inclusion, we got to see the likes of Black Bolt, Professor X, Mr. Fantastic, Captain Marvel, and Captain Carter all gather to guard the multiverse. These cameos came as a shock to many fans, but the team almost featured a very different roster. It would have included a variant of Iron Man, looking a lot more like the villain Ironmonger, and Balder the Brave, a previously unseen hero who would have been played by Daniel Craig. This was confirmed by storyboards by concept artist Soren Bent that showed both heroes heading into battle against the Scarlet Witch. Why the pair was replaced at the 11th hour remains unknown, though it's been rumored that Craig couldn't make it to the US to film due to COVID restrictions. When writer-director James Gunn was briefly canned by Disney in 2018, Warner Brothers quickly signed him to craft a sequel to David Ayer's Suicide Squad. While the first film wasn't loved by critics or audiences, Gunn wasn't deterred.
And yet here you are.
While Margot Robbie and Viola Davis returned as Harley Quinn and Amanda Waller, the sequel's cast was mostly newbies. Among them was Idris Elba as Bloodsport, who bore a strange resemblance to Will Smith's Deadshot from the first film. In 2019, Deadline claimed that Elba was being eyed to replace Smith as Deadshot rather than play a new character. Concept artist David Levy even revealed storyboards from the sequel's pre-production that confirmed Deadshot was originally intended to be in Gunn's film. Whether or not Elba was ever considered for the role was never officially confirmed, but everyone involved seems happy that he wound up playing a new character.
James didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. Deadshot is a great character and Will slays it.
That choice also left the door open for Smith to return to his old role, though all the changes happening in the DCU make that possibility more uncertain than ever. Spider-Man No Way Home saw the return of so many Spider-Man villains it's hard to count them all. Willem Dafoe was back as Green Goblin, Alfred Molina reprised his role as Doc Ock, Jamie Foxx returned as Electro, Thomas Hayden Church was once again Sandman, and Rhys Evans returned as Lizard. If you're counting, you might realize that group was one short of being enough to form the iconic Sinister Six. As a result, fans who saw the trailers suspected that Jake Gyllenhaal might return as Mysterio to complete the team. But when the movie came out, he was nowhere to be seen, though not for lack of trying. More than a year after the movie premiered, concept artist Phil Langone shared a draft of a scene that featured the bull-headed baddie. He noted that, at one point during the storyboarding process, Mysterio was the one responsible for Aunt May's death. But in the end, that particular kill went to Green Goblin, which may have been for the best as it added extra weight to the character's journey. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow finally got her own movie in 2021, but since her character was already dead, filmmakers needed to establish where in the MCU's timeline the movie took place. They did this with a scene featuring Thunderbolt Ross, but according to writer Eric Pearson, that scene was almost unnecessary. Speaking on comicbook.com's Phase Zero podcast, Pearson described a very early edition of the script that actually included a scene with Tony Stark instead. He explained, "One version of the script prior to me literally had written into it the end moment of Civil War with Tony and Natasha, but it was old footage. It would have been, hey audience, remember where we are. We're going to key off of this moment of her." We don't know for sure what Robert Downey Jr.'s take on this scene would have been, but Pearson ultimately discarded the Stark cameo anyway. Deadpool turned the movie industry on its head in 2016, and despite the fact that it shattered box office records, director Tim Miller decided not to return for Deadpool 2. And when he went, several potential cameos went with him. As concept artist Alexander Lozano revealed on Instagram, Miller did have a vision for the sequel, and it included the Thing. The hero would have had a showdown with the mutant villain Juggernaut, with the rest of the Fantastic Four also popping up. Lozano shared images of the entire team based on the actors who'd played them in the 2015 reboot. According to him, Miller had specifically instructed him to portray the group more faithfully than any of their on-screen depictions had at that point. Ultimately, David Leitch took the reins of the film and ditched the Fantastic Four cameos. Instead, Colossus stepped in to fight Juggernaut, unfortunately for both of them. In X-Men Days of Future Past, Kitty Pryde sends Wolverine's consciousness back in time to change history with the help of a younger group of X-Men. And if you're confused as to why Kitty Pryde suddenly has mental time travel powers, an early version of the script has the explanation. Originally, Cyclops and Jean Grey's daughter, Rachel Summers, was supposed to send Wolverine's mind back into his younger body. As writer Simon Kinberg explained on the Q&A podcast, it was Rachel that sent Wolverine back in the first draft of my script. I had Storm having this kind of complicated relationship with her because she's the orphan of Jean, who's Storm's friend, who's dead, and Scott, who was Storm's friend, who's dead. Ultimately, Kinberg scrapped this idea for simplicity's sake. The movie already had plenty of drama, and working Rachel into the story would have made things more complicated. Considering mental time travel is confusing enough, we can't disagree.
So she sends Bishop back in time.
No, just his consciousness into his younger self, his younger body.
Wow.
So he gave Kitty the ability and justified it as one of her secondary powers, a concept from the X-Men comics. For years, director Zack Snyder insisted that his cut of Justice League was almost ready to be delivered. It just needed some special effects. But when the infamous Snyder Cut came out, it was clear he'd filmed some entirely new sequences as well. Since the movie's nearly 4 hours long, it's hard to imagine that anything could have been left out. But it turns out Warner Brothers requested that Snyder not include one appearance from a major DC superhero that he'd planned. As he told Vanity Fair in 2021, "We shot a version of this scene with Green Lantern, but the studio really fought me and said, 'We really don't want you to do Green Lantern,' so I made a deal with them." The deal was that Martian Manhunter replaced Green Lantern in a newly shot scene using motion capture. Unfortunately, that left a scene featuring Wayne T. Carr as John Stewart on the cutting room floor. Since 2012, the Arrowverse has introduced audiences to the DCU's more obscure heroes like Mr. Terrific, Firestorm, and Black Lightning. But one lesser-known character only made it into the spotlight when a bigger hero was nixed by the studio.
That's the thing. They ain't themselves.
In Legends of Tomorrow, we meet the Golden Age hero Hourman, but he wasn't the first choice to lead the super team. In fact, concept artist Andy Poon revealed on Instagram that the team was originally supposed to be helmed by Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern. Poon was initially told to design a new look for the green-ringed hero, but was told soon after that they actually couldn't use the character. So, Hourman was chosen as a fill-in. Played by actor Patrick J. Adams, Hourman first appeared in the Season 1 episode Legendary. Adams reprised the role in Season 2's The Justice Society of America, while Alan Scott has yet to make his live-action debut. In Arrow, one-time Superman actor Brandon Routh returned to DC as Ray Palmer, better known as the Atom. In a shift from his origins in the comics, Ray is the CEO of the technology firm that takes over Queen Consolidated, and his powers come from a suit of armor. Fans may have suspected that Palmer was being turned into an Iron Man copy, but the truth is a little more complicated. Producers had initially hoped Ted Kord, the Blue Beetle, would be the man to take over Oliver Queen's company. Earlier episodes even alluded to Kord's character. But when the time came, the studio announced he was off limits. Producer Andrew Kreisberg talked about the swap during an appearance at San Diego Comic-Con, explaining, "We actually originally asked for Ted Kord, but DC has other plans for him, so they said, 'How about Ray Palmer?' And we said, that would work even better." In the end, the Atom stood in for Blue Beetle and became a big enough character to get his own spin-off with Legends of Tomorrow. Looking at how poorly 2023's Blue Beetle performed in theaters, we're curious to see exactly how Ted Kord will play into the hero's live-action future.
It's alive. Ted Kord is alive.
Netflix's Jessica Jones stars Kristen Ritter as the super-powered private detective, but the show also features Jessica's adoptive sister, Trish Walker. A capable fighter, Trish becomes a vigilante and even tries on an outfit reminiscent of her comic book alter ego, Hellcat. Some fans were surprised by her character's inclusion, but the character that was originally meant to be used might be even more surprising: Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel. Showrunner Melissa Rosenberg discussed Jessica Jones's rocky road to production with IGN and said that when the show was originally planned as a network series for ABC, Danvers had been included, but then the MCU exploded in popularity. The feature film team decided that Captain Marvel was better suited for the big screen, and it's a good thing too. as Rosenberg reflected. As it turned out, Patsy Walker ended up being a much more appropriate fit with Jessica. It was better that her best friend was not someone with powers. It actually ends up being a really great mirror for her. Today, it might not seem strange to see Superman and the Flash rubbing elbows in live action. After all, we've now seen them team up in Justice League and in episodes of the CW's The Flash. But back in the early 2000s, the closest fans ever came to seeing that combo was a young Clark Kent fighting alongside the hoodie-wearing speedster Bart Allen, also known as Impulse, in Smallville. Smallville starred Tom Welling as a fledgling Superman slowly discovering his superpowers. When other heroes popped in for guest appearances, we got to see origin stories for the likes of Green Arrow, Aquaman, and Cyborg. Unfortunately, there were some names that execs would not sign off on for guest appearances. So while we got the younger spin-off hero Impulse, the Flash proper never actually turned up.